Are you looking to prep for the ACT, or are you already prepping for the ACT and wondering if what you're doing is actually helping you at all, or if you're just twiddling your thumbs and wasting your time? If so, stay tuned, because what we're going to talk about today is ACT prep, why so many are doing it wrong. These are habits that I've seen over the years. Basically, my story is, hi, my name is Brooke. I've been a tutor for well over a decade. I've scored perfectly on an official administration of the ACT. I coached a student to a perfect 36 out of 36 composite on an official administration of the ACT. And I've seen a lot of people prep, and I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't work. And so what I'm going to share with you today are some of my don'ts of ACT prep. Before we get started too far into this video, subscribe to our channel. All you have to do is click subscribe and go to our website and sign up for a mailing list, SupertutorTV.com/subscribe. We will keep you abreast of any deals, giveaways, new videos, new products that we have for sale, all that kind of good stuff. Keep you posted. So let's get into this. Number one is treating the ACT as if it were a school test. So one of the things that sometimes students do when they take the ACT is they fail to see that this test is really a test of strategy and approach. And that is not how your classes at school are. Your classes at school are designed to test you on specific content that your teacher gave you to memorize, understand, or apply. You go home, you memorize, understand, or apply that specific material, you come back and you have to remember it. There's a lot rather remembering things that has to go on with your school stuff. The ACT is different because it's very much about approach. Now, yes, granted, there is some content on the ACT, and for the most part, that's in the English section and the math section, right? You have to know your grammar rules, and you basically have to know your math basics for everything up through about pre-calculus. The rest of the test, the science of the reading, they're not content-oriented. There's maybe one or two outside information questions on the science maximum, okay? So what they're testing you on is your process. And by the way, that process is not the same as what you do in school, because it's designed differently. So you have to approach the ACT as the ACT, and you have to look out for approach and strategy and how you do the test. It is more about how you do it than what you know. And even in the English section and even in the math section, how you approach the test is the most important part. And I see students sometimes not understand that or not realize that, and not approach this test with that mentality that they have to change habits of approach. Number two, the next bad habit of people who are ACT prepping is when they say, before I actually prep, I'm gonna just go take an official test cold just to see how I do, and we'll see how I do. You don't wanna take the test cold to just see how you do, because here's the facts. If you take the test cold to see how you do, chances are you're not going to do as well as if you had prepared for the test first. If you want to see how you do on this test, take a practice test. There are plenty of ways also in many places to get a proctored practice test. Some high schools will offer it. Sometimes a tutoring center will offer it, and then they will try to sell you on their tutoring, which you can ignore. But there are a lot of ways to try to just go out and take a practice test. We have a link to a practice test. We're going to put that in the description below. And then we have video explanations for free to every question on that official practice test on SupertutorTV.com, which is a preview of our SupertutorTV.com ACT prep course. So that's what I recommend you do. It's not going to psych you out, and then you can learn from your mistakes. That's the other problem of taking it cold. You're not going to get it back for at least a month and a half, and that's even if it's a released test, and half the time the test isn't released, and then you can never even go over it, so you can't even learn from your mistakes. That's not very helpful, is it? Better to do a diagnostic test and then go over your answers. That is a much better option than taking the test for real cold. Because if you're going to screw up, which you will, the first time that you take this test, you do not want to do it on the books. It's going to psychologically make it harder for you to then go back and retake this test multiple times. And you might not get the score you want the second time you take it. And then that means suddenly you have to take it 3 times. And when you take this test like 3, 4, 5 times, there gets to be a point that you will get sick of this test. And I will tell you, just psychologically, when you go in to take the test for real, there's a secret hope in the back of your mind that you'll just do wonderfully and you won't have to study at all. And it's just unrealistic to think that you're going to get the best results if you just go try to take it cold and see how it goes. It's just not a good idea. Number 3, the third bad habit of ACT preppers is that they use mediocre materials. I've gone off on this quite a bit in other videos. I'm not going to get into it too much right here, but what I will say is that the big brands generally do not do as good of a job on sharing with you the secrets of the ACT as some other brands of books. And when I say big brands, what I'm talking about is McGraw-Hill, Barron's, Kaplan, and Princeton. Those books are just not as good as some of the other materials available on the market. Your time is limited. My advice to you is you want to use the best materials possible when you're prepping. And the best test materials to use are always official materials. That's why our prep series is totally based on official materials, because it's more like the nature of the test. You study from Princeton Review, they might miss 4 or 5 question types that are on the real test. And the look, tone, feel of the test is going to be different. And some of the questions may even be debatable. Some of them may have huge typos in them. Some of them may even be wrong and not like the test. And then my other favorite thing is independent tutor materials. People like me, and there's other people like me out there who've been doing this for over 10 years, we know more about, and we've worked with people one-on-one. We often, I feel like, know more about this test than some of the people who are working at these big brands that are just trying to turn out these ACT prep guides really fast. Because we've been in the thick of it with students one-on-one and we know what they're getting wrong. And I find that those voices tend to be a better source of information and help when it comes to prepping for tests. The fourth mistake of prep on the ACT that I see is that people don't think about timing when they prep. Basically, it really makes me sad when I see students do this, but sometimes what happens is I have students who, they were self-prepping before they came to me, and while they self-prepped, they never bothered to time themselves on a single practice test when they were doing their ACT prep. So they do all this prep, they think they've got a 35 locked up on the test, they go in to take the thing, and they run out of time on like 3 out of 4 sections, and they go, holy crap, what did I do? And they walk out with like a 28. So worry about timing. This test is all about timing. Don't forget about it. I know, again, if you've watched my other videos, you're going to be like, oh my God, you repeat yourself so much. But it's such a simple thing. On this test, time matters. Number 5, when students recognize why answers are right when they go over their wrong answers, but they don't change their habits and they don't fully engage so that they can get the questions right the next time. So basically, it's recognition. People recognize their mistakes, but they don't actually take the initiative to fix them. And here's basically what that means. This is a little bit similar to a point that I have in one of our other videos, which is like our mind hacks video, which I recommend you guys go check out, which is basically talking about study skills that are based on psychology. And this is kind of based on a psychological principle, which is the idea that recognition is like one stage of learning, and like really deeply understanding something means that you don't just recognize that something is correct or recognize how something works, but you actually could explain it yourself or you could do it yourself, right? So being able to look at a problem, look at an algebra problem and say, oh, that's the correct solution. That's a lower form of comprehension than being able to say, oh, that's the algebra problem, here's how you do it, and doing it yourself. You see the difference? So one of the biggest mistakes that I see when people prep is oftentimes, right, you know how, and I've talked about this in my other videos, how a lot of times a big portion of your prep is taking a practice test and then going over your wrong answers. Well, when you go over your wrong answers, you can't just watch, even if you're doing like our video series, you can't just watch the explanation and nod in agreement and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that's the answer. And agree. That's not enough to get you to do it right. You have to get to the point that you could almost teach the thing to someone else. You have to organize the ideas and understand how they work together and be able to repeat that process, not just stare at that process and say, oh, that makes sense. So you have to engage with your learning. You can't just look at answer explanations and say, oh, that makes sense, move on. You have to hijack your brain at that point and say, okay, that's how you do the problem. Now I'm going to hide that answer explanation and I'm going to redo the problem myself. Then I'm going to find 10 more problems that are just like it and I'm going to try those problems on my own and make sure I know how to do them. And then I'm going to pretend like I'm going to teach this to somebody else and write down how I would explain how to do this to somebody else. Do you see how I have to engage in learning to a fuller extent? You have to take this into your own hands. You have to do more practice problems. You have to redo that problem. You have to figure out what's the strategy, what's the angle, what's the technique that I'm going to use to get this right. And then your studying is becoming much more effective than you just like passively looking back over your stuff and going, oh, that's why I got that wrong. Okay, I understand why I got it wrong, and moving on. Okay, Cool. So I hope you liked that video. If you are prepping for the ACT, again, check out our ACT prep series. Like I said, we have free explanations for the entire official practice exam, which I recommend as a great place to start your ACT prep journey. Also, in the meantime, check out our social media and check out our other videos on YouTube and our blog at SupertutorTV.com. And I will see all of you guys next time. Thanks for joining us.